I learned that I was wrong the day Thomas Hartley discovered I'd been managing his household accounts. We were engaged then, and I thought I was being helpful. His face shifted from surprise to something colder. Unnatural, he said, the word landing like a closed door. I was 24. I had 4 more years to learn exactly how wrong I was. Philadelphia taught me its lessons carefully. The suitors who arrived with interest and left with relief when I spoke too directly about literature or politics. My aunt's constant corrections. Her voice sharp with embarrassment whenever I forgot to let a man explain something I already understood. Let him talk. Caroline, even if you know, especially if you know, the exhaustion of pretending became its own kind of knowledge. I learned to calculate the exact second when a man's admiration turned to discomfort. Usually happened when I solved something faster than he could. I learned to pause before answering, to make my face uncertain even when my mind was sure. I learned that too much was the phrase they settled on when they meant I should be less. By 28, I'd become an expert at being wrong. The marriage broker's office smelled like dust and disappointment. Mrs. Henderson sat across from me, afternoon light making her frown deeper as I listed my qualifications. I could keep books, manage household finances, read Latin. Her pen stopped moving. Men don't marry ledgers. Miss Caroline, her voice was kind the way pity is kind. Tell him you bake bread. Mention you so, I almost agreed. The instinct to lie about who I was had become reflexive, a survival skill learned through repeated rejection. Then something in me rebelled. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the last fragment of who I'd been before Philadelphia taught me better. I won't begin a marriage with deception. I said, if he wants someone who only knows baking, he doesn't want me. Mrs. Henderson sighed, the way women sigh when other women refuse to learn their place. You're 28. You can't afford principles. But I was tired of what I couldn't afford. Tired of the careful performance. Tired of apologizing for understanding too much. If rejection was inevitable, at least I could meet it honestly. The train platform that morning was all iron and steam. Philadelphia's smoke and spires behind me like everything I was leaving. One trunk, one ticket west. The whistle screamed, and I climbed aboard without looking back. Maybe I was going west to fail in a new place. Or maybe, and this was the dangerous hope I tried not to hold, maybe different rules applied where the land itself was still being named. Maybe out there, in all that wide open space, there was room for someone like me to exist without apology. The problem, everyone agreed, was me, too educated for comfort, too independent for propriety, too much. Maybe the West had space for too much. Maybe that's what all that horizon was for. Colorado sun hit different than Philadelphia light. Harder, more honest. I stepped off the train squinting, my city boots uncertain on the rough wooden platform. I saw him before he saw me. Tall, weathered face, hat in his hands. Thomas Brennan looked like someone who'd spent his life outdoors. Work roughened and direct. My immediate assessment, he looked honest, which might be worse than cruel. Cruel you could defend against. Honest meant you'd see the disappointment clearly when it came. Miss Caroline. No flowery greeting, no false charm, just my name as a question. I extended my hand for a businesslike shake instead of waiting to be helped down the last step. Most men found that off-putting. He took my hand without comment, his grip firm and brief. Mr. Brennan. I kept my voice level. Professional. Already bracing, Thomas, please. He gestured toward my trunk. I can get that for you. The test? I'd run this one before. I can manage. He nodded and waited. Didn't insist, didn't mock. Didn't get offended the way men usually did when you suggested you had capability. Let me know if you change your mind. I tried lifting the trunk. It was heavier than I'd remembered. He stepped forward when I faltered, but only after I'd clearly struggled. Maybe just to the wagon. I admitted. Sure thing. He loaded it easily, and we climbed up to the wagon seat. The ride to his ranch should have been interrogation. That's how these things went. Questions about cooking, sewing, childbearing capacity. I'd prepared careful answers that weren't quite lies. Instead, he asked, "How is the journey?" "Long," I said, waiting for the real questions. I bet. Never been east myself. What's Philadelphia like? I described it carefully, waiting for him to interrupt. To redirect the conversation to what really mattered, my domestic capabilities. He just listened. Actually listened. Asking follow-up questions about things I mentioned. You said in your letter you taught yourself bookkeeping, he said eventually. How'd you manage that? My spine straightened automatically, defensive. My father kept accounts for his shop. I watched, read his books when he wasn't using them. I paused, then added the warning I always gave. I'm not particularly domestic. That's fine. I waited for the but. It didn't come. I speak my mind. I tried again. I'm not delicate. Good. I'm not much for guessing games. Each declaration I threw up like fortification. Each one met with calm acceptance. I didn't trust it. Couldn't trust it. This was probably just the beginning. The polite phase before he discovered what everyone always discovered, that I was more trouble than I was worth. The ranch came into view. Small. Well-maintained. Honest, like everything else about him. As we pulled up, something dangerous unfurled in my chest. Not hope, I told myself firmly. Just curiosity. That's all I'd allow. Welcome home, he said. Home. I didn't correct him. Didn't say this wasn't home. Just a trial period. A conditional arrangement. The word hung there between us. Possibility and lie all at once. A week of polite distance taught me his rhythms. Thomas woke before dawn, worked until dark, spoke only when he had something worth saying. We ate meals together in careful quiet, neither of us addressing the marriage certificate that remained unsigned in his desk drawer. A trial period. We'd agreed, both of us evaluating. His sister Martha came on the third day. She took one look at me and her mouth pursed like she'd tasted something sour. "You're taller than I expected," she said, which wasn't a compliment. She spent an hour lecturing me about proper wifely duties while Thomas's jaw got tighter and tighter. When she finally left, he spoke for the first time since she'd arrived. "You don't have to listen to Martha. I didn't marry her. 7 days." Then he knocked on the kitchen door where I was failing at bread dough. "Can we talk?" His hat was in his hands again. "About business." I wiped flour off my hands, relieved to leave the stubborn dough. "Of course." He brought out ledgers. 3 different notebooks, pages stuffed with loose receipts, columns that didn't add. My fingers itched looking at it. This was chaos. Beautiful, terrible chaos that my mind immediately began organizing. "Bank's asking for clean books," he said. "Loan review in 6 weeks. I'm behind on the accounts. Way behind. I could lose everything if I can't show them the ranch is stable. He looked at me directly. Can you help? Not would you? Or could you try? Can you? Acknowledging capability. Not questioning it. I picked up one of the notebooks. Expenses unrecorded. Revenue scattered across pages with no system. 3 months of complete disorder. The part of me that had always been too much came fully alive. This is chaos. I know. No defensiveness, no shame, just acknowledgement. Can you fix it? He asked. I ran calculations in my head. The volume of work, the time available, the complexity. Yes, I said, but I need something from you. Name it. Honesty. My voice came out sharper than I'd intended. Years of Philadelphia in every syllable. If this doesn't work, if you decide you want someone softer, quieter, more conventional, tell me directly. Don't let me believe I belong here and then change your mind. He looked at me for a long moment. I'm not Thomas from Philadelphia. Caroline, when I say something, I mean it. We shook hands like business partners, not newlyweds. His grip was firm, calloused, real. I set up a workspace at the kitchen table. He brought me the disaster of his records. We established a routine. I worked mornings while he ran the ranch. We ate dinner in careful politeness, maintained our distance, but something had shifted. I had purpose here, not as ornament or servant, but as partner with specific skills he needed and valued. I didn't trust it yet. Trust was dangerous, the kind of luxury I couldn't afford. But for the first time in 4 years, I wondered if different rules might apply out here. Outside my window, he mended fence posts with the same careful attention I gave his ledgers. 2 people. Working, not performing, not pretending, just working. I didn't let myself think about what that might mean. The ledgers became a language between us. Numbers don't lie. And neither did his small kindnesses. Days blurred into routine. Mornings I spent with account books spread across the table, creating order from chaos. Columns began to add. Expenses found their proper categories. The disaster became data, became story, became proof the ranch was more stable than his record-keeping suggested. Thomas would return from checking cattle or mending fence, boots muddy, face weathered. He'd stop by the kitchen, not hovering, just present. Coffee. Black, I'd say, like I said every time. He'd bring it without asking after that. No sugar, no cream, just coffee black and strong the way I preferred. Such a small thing. Why did it feel like being seen? When I discovered he'd been paying above-market prices for feed. I showed him my calculations. This supplier charges 20% more. Here's a better option. I laid out the figures. Comparison clear. Most men would have checked my math. Would have verified with someone else. Someone male. Thomas studied the page for maybe 30 seconds, then nodded. I'll switch them tomorrow. No argument. No, let me think about it. No consultation with men who supposedly knew better. Just trust in my competence. Immediate and complete. I noticed things I had no business noticing. The way his hands moved when he worked. Sure and careful. How he listened when I explained financial projections. Actually processing what I said instead of waiting to speak. When had I started wanting his attention? When had I begun listening for his footsteps? One afternoon, he returned from town with a package. For you, inside was a new ledger book. High quality, leather-bound, expensive. The pages were thick and creamy, the kind that wouldn't bleed ink. Beautiful. Thought you'd need something that wasn't falling apart, he said. Casual, like it wasn't a gift specifically for my work, my unfeminine interests. The parts of me Philadelphia had called unnatural. My throat tightened. Thank you. You're saving my ranch. Least I can do. But it wasn't the least. It was acknowledgement. It was seeing what I did and valuing it enough to invest in it. No one had ever done that before. I began observing him more carefully. The way he treated his horses firm but patient. Never cruel. How he talked to his neighbor, old Mr. Hendricks. Defending a widow's water rights when other men dismissed her concerns. She owns that land same as anyone, Thomas said, his voice flat with certainty. He didn't just tolerate difference. He had a code, consistent and clear, that valued competence and fairness over convention. Martha visited again the next week. She found me at the table, papers everywhere, ink on my fingers. Her mouth pursed, exactly like before. A wife should be in the kitchen, not playing at business. Before I could build my walls higher, before I could defend myself, Thomas appeared in the doorway. Caroline's not playing. His voice was quiet but absolute. She's saving the ranch. She's better with numbers than any accountant in 3 counties. Martha left in a huff of disapproval. I sat there shaking, not from her judgment, but from his defense. You didn't have to do that. Yes, he said simply. I did. 3 words. They settled into me like truth, like possibility, like danger. That night, writing his bank presentation, I realized I wasn't just fulfilling our arrangement anymore. I was invested. I wanted this to succeed the ranch, yes, but also whatever was growing between us in the space between coffee cups and careful kindnesses. The realization terrified me more than any rejection ever had. Because I'd started hoping again, and hope was a luxury I'd learned I couldn't afford. I wondered when I'd started counting his footsteps. When had his silence become familiar? When had I begun to miss it? When he was gone, the storm arrived on a Tuesday. Spring rain that fell hard and steady for 3 days straight. It trapped us inside together, and proximity wore down the careful distance we'd maintained. We played chess the first evening. I was better. Most men hated losing to women. Thomas grinned when I checkmated him. Teach me that move. We cooked together the second day. I was terrible at cooking. He found this amusing, rather than appalling. Good thing you're better with numbers than beef stew, he said, rescuing dinner before I could ruin it completely. Conversation flowed more naturally without the buffer of separate work. We talked about books, weather patterns, the economics of cattle ranching. Normal things, easy things. Things that felt dangerous precisely because they felt so safe. The third evening, lamplight low and rain drumming steady on the roof, he asked about Philadelphia. Not prying, just curious. What made you decide to come west? Something about the storm made everything feel suspended, unreal. Like we existed outside normal time and consequences. Maybe that's why I told him. About Thomas Hartley. About the engagement that ended when I proved too competent. About all the years of being told to diminish myself. I learned to apologize for my mind, I said, staring at my hands. To pretend I didn't understand things I understood perfectly. to ask men for help with problems I'd already solved. That's what ladylike meant, performing helplessness. The silence stretched. I braced for his response. For the withdrawal I knew was coming. For the moment, his face would change, and I'd see what I always saw, the calculation that I was more trouble than I was worth. That sounds exhausting. I looked up. His expression was serious. No mockery, no pity. Just understanding, simple and clear. It was, I whispered, out here. He continued slowly, carefully. We can't afford pretending. Cattle don't care about propriety. Droughts don't respect delicate sensibilities. I need a partner who can think clearly and act decisively. Your mind isn't something to apologize for. Caroline, it's the reason I... He stopped. His jaw tightened. The pause hung between us, weighted with whatever he'd almost said. It's valuable. He finished. But that wasn't what he'd started to say. I knew it. He knew I knew it. Neither of us named the almost admission hovering in the space between us. Later, alone in my room, rain still falling, I faced a terrifying truth. I was beginning to care what he thought. Worse, I was beginning to believe he might genuinely value me, the woman I actually am, not some diminished performance of acceptability. That belief felt more dangerous than any rejection ever had. Because if I believed it, truly believed it, and it turned out to be wrong, I wouldn't survive it. Better to keep my guard up. Better to stay protected. But lying there, listening to rain and thinking about his unfinished sentence, I realized my walls were crumbling whether I wanted them to or not. When he said, "That sounds exhausting," something had broken open in me. Not broken apart. Broken open. Like a door I'd kept locked, finally swinging wide. And I couldn't close it again. No matter how much safer that would be, I couldn't unhear that pause. It's the reason What had he almost said? And why did my whole body feel alert? Waiting. Hoping for an answer I was too afraid to ask for. Mr. Patterson from the bank arrived on a Tuesday. He wasn't alone. "My nephew Carson," he said, gesturing to the young man beside him. "Recent graduate from Eastern Business College. He's assisting me with loan reviews." Carson looked at my ledgers spread across the kitchen table and smirked. "Your wife plays at bookkeeping charming." The word "plays" landed like a slap. Every dismissal I'd ever faced, concentrated into one syllable. I watched Thomas's face harden, but Patterson cut in smoothly. "Let's see these records, shall we?" I'd spent weeks perfecting them. Every transaction recorded, every column balanced, evidence of the ranch's stability, clear and undeniable. I presented my work with the same confidence I'd once had before Philadelphia taught me to hide it. Carson interrupted constantly. "Who taught you this method?" His voice dripped condescension. "Are you certain of these calculations?" He turned to Thomas. "Perhaps you should verify each question was a poison I recognized." The implication clear. How could a woman possibly do this correctly? Patterson grew skeptical. Infected by his nephew's dismissal, he started questioning every entry, suggesting Thomas hire a proper accountant. My careful work, weeks of effort, being dismissed, not because it was wrong, but because of who had done it. Old shame rose in my throat. Maybe I had overstepped again. Maybe my helping had actually damaged things. Years of being too much reflected in Carson's smug face. in Patterson's growing doubt. Then Thomas stood. Before Caroline, I was 3 months from losing this ranch. His voice was level, but steel ran underneath. My accounts were a disaster. Now look at them. He pulled out the old ledgers, the chaos I'd started with. Placed them beside my organized books. The contrast was undeniable. Every transaction recorded, Thomas continued. Every projection accurate. She found errors that saved me thousands. You want to question her competence. Question mine for not hiring her years ago. Patterson's face shifted, calculating. Thomas wasn't finished. Furthermore, if your bank requires I work with someone who dismisses competence based on gender rather than results, maybe I need a different bank. The ultimatum hung in the air. Patterson could lose a profitable account or overcome his nephew's prejudice. The choice was clear in his expression. The accounts appear. He cleared his throat. Thorough. The loan is approved. After they left, I stood in the kitchen shaking, not from fear, from something else entirely, something that felt like being defended, being valued, being worth the risk of standing up to banks and nephews and the whole weight of conventional wisdom. Thomas found me there, my hands gripping the edge of the table. You didn't have to do that, I said, voice unsteady. You could have just agreed to hire someone else. He looked at me like I'd suggested something impossible. No, I couldn't. Because that would mean they were right, that your mind, your skill, your worth are somehow less because you're a woman. I won't participate in that lie. Caroline, not for a loan, not for anything. That night, lying awake, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd risked. His loan, his ranch, his financial future. All to validate not just my mathematics, but my right to be taken seriously. He didn't just tolerate my difference, he defended it, publicly, at cost to himself. And I was terrified, because I was starting to believe I could belong here, that this could be real. That may be impossibly. I'd found someone who valued exactly what everyone else had rejected. Fear makes us do foolish things. Mine almost cost me everything. After the bank incident, after Thomas's public defense, I couldn't sleep. Panic settled in my chest, heavy and familiar. I lay awake cataloging every way this could go wrong. He'd been kind, yes. But what happened when kindness became obligation? When the novelty of my difference wore thin, I remembered Philadelphia Thomas's initial fascination, how he'd found my intelligence refreshing until it became inconvenient, how acceptance turned to resentment. So gradually I hadn't seen it coming until it was too late. That pattern felt safer than this fragile hope growing in my chest. Better to expect rejection than be surprised by it. Better to protect myself now, before I got any more attached. Before this hope could destroy me completely. By dawn, I'd convinced myself I should leave before he realized his mistake, before it became complicated, before I couldn't walk away. I packed my trunk quietly, methodically. The morning was cool, sky pink and orange with sunrise. I wrote a note formal, thanking him for his kindness, releasing him from obligation, citing incompatibility. Lies, all of it. Safer than truth. I was in the barn harnessing the wagon when Thomas found me. Another skill that would have horrified Philadelphia, hitching a wagon alone. Out here, it was just practical. You're leaving? Not a question. I kept working with the harness, not looking at him. It's better this way, before it becomes complicated. It's already complicated. Caroline? He stood in the barn doorway, morning light behind him. At least it is for me. I forced my hands to keep moving, checking straps I'd already checked. You'll find someone easier, someone who fits better, someone who doesn't require defending to bank inspectors and family members. A proper wife who... I don't want a proper wife. His voice was rough. I want you. The words stopped my hands. I finally turned to face him. I spent 35 years building this ranch, he continued, and I've been content. Content with work, with routine, with solitude. Then you arrived with your defensive walls and your brilliant mind and your stubborn conviction that you had to hide the best parts of yourself. And everything changed. I stood frozen, trunk packed, escape planned, and he was saying everything I was terrified to hope for. You think you're too much, Caroline. You're exactly enough. You're what I didn't know I was missing. Your intelligence, your strength, your refusal to pretend those aren't flaws. They're why I... He stopped, jaw tightened, then continued more quietly. They're why I want you to stay. Not out of obligation or pity or any of the reasons you've invented, but because when you're here, this ranch feels like home instead of just property. I was crying now. Years of being told I was wrong. Leaking out. What if you change your mind? What if I'm too difficult, too stubborn, too... Then we'll figure it out, he said simply. Together. That's what partners do. Partners, not master and servant. Not man and ornament. Partners. The choice crystallized before me, terrifying and clear. I could run back to familiar loneliness, protecting myself from potential hurt. Or I could stay and risk believing I'm valued for exactly who I am. One was safe. One was real. I'd been so busy protecting myself from being hurt that I'd nearly destroyed the one place I'd ever truly belonged. Standing in that barn with morning sun slanting through gaps in the wood, I realized the greatest danger wasn't in staying. It was in running. I'd spent my whole life running from rejection. Maybe it was time to run toward something instead. I stood in that barn with my packed trunk and Thomas waiting for my answer. And I made my choice. I warned you, I said, voice shaking. That first day, I told you I'm not like other women. I remember. He was very still. I'm opinionated and stubborn. I'll never be delicate or decorative. I'll probably argue with you about ranch decisions and correct your arithmetic. The words tumbled out confession and challenge and plea all at once. I can rope cattle, but I'll burn dinner. I read philosophy for pleasure. I'll never fit properly into the role everyone expects. And I'm scared. Thomas. I'm terrified that one day you'll wake up and realize you made a terrible mistake. He crossed the barn to stand directly in front of me. Are you done? I nodded, throat tight. Good. Because here's what I know. You're the smartest person I've ever met. You saved my ranch with your mind and your determination. You work harder than any hired hand I've had. You're brave enough to come west alone, honest enough to tell hard truths, and stubborn enough to keep growing even when people tell you to be smaller. That's not a mistake, Caroline. That's exactly who I want building a life with. That's why you want me, I whispered, finally understanding his words from weeks ago. Yes. His voice was quiet but certain. Exactly as you are. I looked at my packed trunk. At the escape route I'd prepared. Then at him, this man who valued what everyone else rejected, who defended my right to be fully myself, who offered partnership instead of performance. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Not anymore. I started unpacking the trunk. Thomas exhaled. I hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. He helped me carry everything back to the house. Neither of us talking much. We didn't need to. When I started unpacking that trunk, I wasn't just putting clothes back in drawers. I was unpacking years of armor, years of pretending, years of believing I had to choose between authenticity and belonging. Turns out, with the right person, you don't have to choose at all. That afternoon, we rode into town together. At the minister's house, we finalized the marriage that had been tentative for weeks. The certificate made official what had been growing between us, not ownership, but partnership. Not rescue, but recognition. When Martha heard, she came by with more disapproval. This time, I didn't armor myself or wait for Thomas to defend me. I spoke for myself. I'm not the wife you'd have chosen for Thomas, but I'm the wife he chose for himself. And I'm the woman I've finally stopped apologizing for being. Martha left sputtering. Thomas grinned. That was better than any defense I could have offered. That evening, we sat on the porch watching stars emerge. The air was cool, the horizon endless. He asked what changed my mind. I realized that strength doesn't always mean standing alone, I said slowly. Sometimes it means being brave enough to let someone stand with you. You taught me that. He took my hand. First time he'd done so without pretense or excuse. We taught each other. His hand was calloused, warm, real. I'd spent 28 years being told I was wrong. And here was someone saying, "You're exactly right. Not despite your difference, but because of it." How do you walk away from being seen? The trunk that had symbolized my escape sat empty in the corner. Not needed, not wanted. I'd spent my whole life learning how to leave. That morning in the barn, I finally learned how to stay. Staying, I discovered, required more courage than leaving ever had. Because staying meant believing I deserved this. Meant trusting that acceptance wouldn't transform into rejection. Meant letting myself hope again, fully and without protection. I looked at Thomas in the starlight. At this man who'd stood up to banks and sisters and conventional wisdom to defend my worth. Who'd risked his ranch to validate my competence. Who wanted me not in spite of my difference, but because of it. Thank you, I said. For what? For seeing me. For wanting what you saw. He squeezed my hand gently. Thank you for staying. We didn't talk much after that. Just sat there as stars multiplied overhead and the future stretched out before us. Uncertain, but ours. Together. They say the West is where people go to reinvent themselves. I discovered it's where I finally became who I always was. I'm writing this 3 years later. Maybe 4. Time moves differently when you're measuring it in harvests and cattle sales instead of social obligations. And disappointments. The ranch thrives. The accounts remain organized, balanced. Proof that competence transcends gender when you're willing to see it. Thomas and I work as genuine partners. I handle finances and he handles livestock. But the boundaries blur constantly. I've learned to rope and brand. He's learned to read financial reports and trust my judgment completely. When I'm right, he admits it. When he's right, I do the same. Neither of us has to pretend. We still disagree. I'm still stubborn. He's still quietly immovable when he believes something. But we've learned to argue as equals, to listen as partners, to respect each other's expertise. It's ordinary. It's everything I never thought possible. Martha eventually softened. Happened the night I delivered her grandson during a difficult birth. My steady nerves and the medical book I'd studied saving both mother and child. Competence, it turns out, transcends propriety when lives are at stake. She still doesn't entirely approve of me, but she respects me. That's enough. More mail-order brides arrive in town over the years. I watch them step off trains carrying the same defensive armor I wore, expecting rejection. Braced for disappointment, I make a point to welcome them. You don't have to be smaller here, I tell them quietly. The West needs strong women. Some understand immediately, others take time. All of them need to hear it. I wish someone had told me. Would have saved considerable anguish. This morning was typical. Me at the kitchen table with ledgers and correspondence, Thomas returning from checking cattle. He kissed my temple, glanced at my work. The Sullivan order did their payment clear yesterday. We can order that new equipment now. Your call. You know the finances better than I do. Such ordinary conversation, such extraordinary trust. I used to think I had to choose be myself or be loved. What I learned is that being loved for pretense isn't being loved at all. And being yourself, fully and without apology, attracts the right person, the one who doesn't want you smaller, quieter, less. Thomas didn't rescue me from my difference. He rescued me from believing my difference was wrong. The qualities I was told to hide became the foundation of everything we built. My mind, my strength, my refusal to pretend they're not obstacles to love. They're the reason our partnership works. Sometimes I think about Philadelphia Thomas, about all the people who wanted me diminished. I don't hate them anymore. They gave me the gift of knowing exactly what I don't want, and the wisdom to recognize what I do when it finally arrives. I think about that girl on the train, armored in expectations of rejection, certain her difference made her unlovable. I wish I could tell her, you're not too much. You've just been in places too small. The West didn't change me. It gave me space to become who I always was. And Thomas, he had the wisdom to value what others had overlooked. That's the secret they don't tell you. There's someone who will love you, not despite your difference. But because of it, you just have to be brave enough to let them. And if you're reading this, wondering if you're too much, too different, too wrong, you're not. You're exactly enough. You just haven't found your West yet. But it's out there, waiting, wide open and honest, with room enough for exactly who you are. And it's worth every terrifying step toward it, worth the risk of hoping again, worth believing you deserve to be seen and valued and loved for exactly who you've always been. I've learned that hearts are meant to be used, not protected. That partnership means building something together that honors both your strengths. That real love doesn't ask you to become smaller. It celebrates what makes you uniquely yourself. That's the foundation of every lasting bond. And I'm grateful every single day that I was brave enough to stay and find out.